Superstar prosecutor Kamala Harris made history when she was elected California's first African-American female district attorney.
To be a prosecutor is to really be engaged in one of the most noblest professions that anyone could do.
Harris was then sworn in by the first woman to serve as California's U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein. Neither knew then Harris would later become the state's first black woman senator or the first such presidential nominee.
I, Kamala Harris,
do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear.
Congratulations.
You can hear the excitement in that room, but Harris was joining a conventional, even conservative arm of local government. I will tell you, traditionally, prosecutors are the first line that push for arrests, plea deals, and heavier prison terms. It is thought that it's up to other people, the defense lawyers or the trial judges or the appeals judges, to push back sometimes. And that's largely true regardless of who is a prosecutor. On your screen, we're showing you just a few of the top federal prosecutors in the country. They're all known for being tough. But these assumptions about what prosecutors should do or only do are increasingly controversial. There's a new wave of prosecutors, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, who argue their role is not just to push the hardest and see what sticks, but to balance calls to be tough with judgment about what is fair, humane, and effective, not just being punitive for its own sake. And that balance, by the way, is linked to racial justice, because when people talk about prosecutors just being as tough as possible in the abstract, what we actually see is those who face the toughest law enforcement are black, brown, or poor in America. And we've reported on all the facts on that for you for years. Now, Harris navigated both camps in her work. She did not embrace a full progressive reform agenda in office. I'll show you examples. She resisted efforts to provide independent prosecutors in police brutality cases or to overturn some alleged wrongful convictions. She also backed even harsher punishment in certain areas, like a new law in California to jail parents if students miss school. Accounts of her record emphasize that she was trying to be incremental, not crusading from the outside with easy talk, but trying to reform the system from within. And others, you may have heard, viewed her time in DA and AG, that record, as very far from being a progressive prosecutor. Harris did, however, embrace many smart-on-crime reforms. And she was explicit about, as I mentioned, balancing being tough in some cases while also trying to root out police brutality and racial discrimination. And she explained that back then.
It is a myth to say that African Americans don't want law enforcement. We do. What we don't want is racial profiling. What we don't want is excessive force. But we do want law enforcement. So let's define it in the way that works for us.
That's the record. That was back then, not talking about national political office or politics. That's from back then. So there's nuance to this, which is why it's our special report right now. If you want to look at the evidence and the details and the history, it's there. And there's a difference between being tough on murder crimes and tough on drug use. Harris was actually an early leader on reforming new diversion programs to try to help deal with America's long-running problem about nonviolent drug users. And her office had good, low rates for reoffense. Harris advocated treating personal drug use as more of a public health issue than another chance to lock up people for years. And she explained that on a panel, this was back in 2008, as DA.
That whole war on drugs was a complete failure. It was a failure. And that's evidenced by the increased prison population in this country. We have to have a drug policy that says that we have got to treat that issue as a substance abuse issue, as a public health issue as much as anything.
That's how she broke it down. And again, it's interesting to see it then. Some of those positions have gotten more support in the recent years, but that was back then. Now, then Harris entered national politics, and she emphasized those reform efforts more than what I'm calling the tough on crime part of her record. And that's pretty standard, by the way. Politicians emphasizing the more popular thing in their history rather than tough or debatable calls, some of which might not age well. But as part of our report here, I want you to keep in mind something we kind of know. I bet you know it in the back of your head. The environment around what we think is good justice, fair justice, has been shifting. After decades of both parties talking about being tough on crime, with Democrats demanding more prison, more capital punishment, and a larger war on drugs, against that long-running backdrop, the BLM movement grew, and scrutiny on brutality and discrimination grew, and shifting politics emerged about prosecutors, with Democrats even competing over reform. To that end, when Harris was running in the last presidential primary season, we actually spoke to her at a justice conference, which, in a sign of an effort towards reform conversations, was held in a former prison. And she then rebuked our U.S. prison system as a failure.
If we want healthy communities, if we want to be true to the values of redemption, we have to agree that the incarceration system of America is one of the greatest failures of public policy in our country. The goal should be healthy communities, because healthy communities are safe communities.
That's what she was saying in that election cycle, and that emphasis put Harris at home with most Dems, and really more balanced than most other politicians. Consider, as I mentioned, the top Democrats backed very harsh policies in Clinton's '94 crime bill. That includes 3 strikes and you're out, and those harsh drug penalties. Those are some of the very crackdowns the party is now pushing to roll back, and yet the people who supported that, as you see on your screen, included not only President Clinton, but one of the party's top figures on the Judiciary Committee at the time, Joe Biden. So for legal liberals, concerns about Harris's DA record are, as a factual matter, they are smaller than the politician she just replaced. It wouldn't make much sense to be mad at her for incremental reform, say for not full-blown progressive reform of harsh laws, when the literal recent alternative was, according to those critiques, worse. Politicians who were all in on the crime bill, like Biden and Clinton. Again, I'm just telling you the history. Now, politically, you have election analysts who say Harris has a strength here, that she can now run on being a prosecutor and as Kamala the cop, which, quote, doesn't sound so bad in 2024. Now, everything I've just told you is about her service as DA. Substantively, that is part of why she has so much experience. Politically, it may help her draw on both the tough and reformer experience. And factually, again, both parties have tapped prosecutors as promising leaders and candidates for many decades. We could show you other prosecutors turned Democratic candidates like Amy Klobuchar or Senator Blumenthal. Nothing unusual about this same playbook for Harris. And there are few signs that party liberals, even if they would want more reform, that the party's liberals are going to suddenly hold Kamala Harris to a higher standard than all those other prosecutors who've run as Democrats. Now, that's the DA history. There's more. In 2011, Harris went on to be the top law enforcement official in California. She won the AG race and then oversaw these policies targeting criminal organizations. Her tenure saw a drop in violent crime, but her new role also gave her experience farther from just individual trials and local crime. It added a whole bunch of other topics and challenges, and she embraced some of them, using that post to back equal rights for same-sex couples to adopt, and famously instructing state clerks to issue those same-sex marriage licenses.
Hi, this is Dean.
You must start the marriages immediately.
Now, as I mentioned at the top of this report, people often lump all of Harris's legal work together. But it's a little more complicated, or at least there were phases. She served for over a decade as a prosecuting lawyer inside the DA's office, as you see on your screen. Then she rose to be DA herself. Then she was Attorney General of all of California. Now that, we should mention, is more government experience than many national candidates have had when they approach the White House. It's more time in government than Carter or Obama had when they first ran for president, or than, say, J.D. Vance right now, if we're talking about experience or what type of candidate you're looking at and who's on a fast track. Now, the AG portfolio was also wider, as I mentioned, than the DA's office. That's why Kamala Harris took on that key national role battling banks over mortgage abuse after the financial crisis. It's why she clashed with billionaire banker Jamie Dimon. She recounted this in her book, how he was yelling about his shareholders. And she yelled back, basically, quote, "I gave it right back. Your shareholders? My shareholders are the homeowners of California. You come and see them." You talk to them about who got robbed, she told them. She played hardball and may or may not have won. When you're in the middle of a legal case, you got a lot of lawyers, you got a lot of negotiation, but you don't know who's going to back down. On that one, as you see on your screen, the banks backed down big time. She won $18 billion in settlements for people who were harmed by all that Wall Street malfeasance. It's the kind of victory that matters for people, even if it is far afield from some of the debates and attacks you might have heard on her record as a prosecutor. And it also quiets certain debates about whether you were tough enough on the banks or smart on crime or all these other things. When it works, and she emphasized that at the time.
As a result of 13 months of intense discussions, sometimes battle, we have delivered to California $18 billion in relief for California's homeowners.
That's what the history shows. Kamala Harris was a public service lawyer, and then she was the DA herself, and then she was the Attorney General. And across that time, while a lot of other people were talking about this stuff or doing politics about this stuff or critiquing others about this stuff, she was actually doing this stuff. If you look at the whole record, as I showed you, some of it might not have aged as well. Some of it was certainly tough on crime, even though that might, for some people in the general election, be a good political thing. That's up to you as a voter. But she was doing it the whole time. And so now, as we gear up for the general election that really officially kicks off next week, it seems her role across all those phases of her public service career is something that she and her allies think she can stand on. Now we're going to get a special perspective from a Democrat who also went from prosecutor to politics, breaking barriers as a former prosecutor who became mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, my exclusive guest when we're back together in 90 seconds.
Febreze. When you host, your bathroom can feel like a revolving door. Keep things fresh with Febreze Small Spaces. It's an outlet-free air freshener that fights odors for 45 days. So even after every flush, you know your bathroom smells amazing. La, 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 la.
Hi, glad everyone's here. Let's get started.
When they want to squeeze up,
let me share my screen. Okay, sorry about that. I'm excited to share the...
They want a squeeze up.
Deliciously delectable delectables.
Squeeze up.
Introducing Allison's Black Psoriasis. She thinks her flaky gray patches are all people see.
Otezla is the #1 prescribed pill to treat plaque psoriasis. Over here. Otezla can help you get clearer skin and reduce itching and flaking with no routine blood tests required. Doctors have been prescribing Otezla for over a decade. Otezla is also approved to treat psoriatic arthritis. Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can happen. Otezla may cause severe diarrhea, nausea, or vomiting. Some people taking Otezla had depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss. Upper respiratory tract infection and headache may occur.
With clear skin, girls' day out is a good day out. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla.
Kamala Harris's experience as a prosecutor back in the spotlight, and we're joined by a federal prosecutor who went on to her own political career as the former mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. Welcome.
It's my pleasure.